Hi there, my name is Victoria Bowler, and today we are looking at a really practical way to begin the planning process, even if you are starting this in the middle of the school year. We've said before that there is never a bad time to start thinking carefully and creatively about your musical goals for your students, and that is true no matter when you start planning. Because whatever you do planning-wise in the middle of the year right now only helps your summer and your fall planning later. This is a process that you can use if you are starting at a brand new music position in the middle of the year, or if you've already taught the fall semester and you just want to straighten out your plans for the spring and get organized. There are really only two big steps when it comes to planning in the middle of the school year. The first is to take stock of where you are right now, and then the next is to make a map of where you're going. So let's jump in. I like to start planning with a curriculum outline, and here's an example of that. A curriculum outline is a broad overview of the musical concepts I want to highlight in my teaching. It takes our values as music teachers, the things that we love and we care about and that we want our students to experience in our classrooms, and it actualizes them through musical concepts that we're going to teach throughout the year. When we start planning in the middle of the school year, we'll begin by taking a look at where we are right now with a blank curriculum outline. And we'll begin to write down the concepts that students have engaged with so far. Now, this is the editable document from the Elementary Music Planning Kit and from inside the planning binder, and I will link those below. But you can also really easily make your own by opening up a Google Doc and going to File, Page Setup, and making the document landscape. Then we'll go back to the top menu again, and we're going to click Insert Table. I like to put the grade levels along the left-hand side and then the elements of music along the top. If you've already been teaching this year at your school, you'll document what you've already covered so far in the first semester. So maybe for your situation, you know that you've looked at steady beat in kindergarten, and perhaps you've done some singing games to develop the singing voice. Maybe you've looked at some different ways to explore loud and quiet. Whatever it is, write down what you have done. Now, a quick caveat here. At the time this video comes out, I know that many teachers may not be sure they've covered much of anything content-wise, and that is okay. No matter what your first semester looked like in terms of covering the actual music curriculum, and I'm using huge air quotes here, it was valuable. Please do not fall into the planning trap of feeling that you are somehow behind schedule. You are not. The purpose of our music class is not to push ahead and cover as many musical concepts as we possibly can. The purpose is to build relationships with students and develop lifelong musicians. Now, we can be realistic about the musical concepts students have already engaged with, and we can be excited about the musical ground we still want to cover. If you're starting at a new school and you know what the previous teacher has worked on already, then great. That is absolutely an ideal scenario. But if you don't have that information, I would probably recommend starting all grade levels at the beginning of the learning sequence. And that brings us to the next step, which is to make a plan for the rest of the semester. When new entrepreneurs begin a business and they are looking for funding, they make a business plan with projections for their future business development. They look ahead at the growth they expect to see over a set number of years in a set number of areas, and they use that projection as one of the things that helps them get contributions from investors. An investor doesn't expect a first-year business to bring in the same amount of revenue that a 10-year business would. Now, as music teachers, I know we don't necessarily think of ourselves as entrepreneurs, but just like it helped us when we were thinking through our Informants presentation, this frame of mind can be really helpful when it comes to long-range planning. Now that we know where we are, we'll be able to make some projections for where we think we can go. And for this, I recommend taking an existing curriculum outline and then tweaking it for your students' needs. Now, I've shared several different iterations of curriculum outlines in the past, so I will link one of those videos here. Depending on where your students are in terms of conscious musical concepts, this next step is going to look kind of different for everyone. But the basic idea is that you'll start with what you've already looked at in your curriculum this year, and then you just start plugging in the next steps in the learning sequence. If you are brand new at a school and you're starting everyone at the beginning of the learning sequence, you're going to start writing in those foundational concepts for all grade levels. This is also a good idea if maybe you're not new at a school, but your students are not used to you implementing this type of planning approach. So treating all of our students as beginners can absolutely look a little wacky visually because we see that multiple grades are working on the same concepts at the same time. That's fine. It's worth it to build a solid foundation of musical concepts so that our students are set up for success. Two quick notes here. First, we can get hung up on the exact sequence of musical concepts, especially with things like rhythm and melody. So should I be starting my sequence with So and Me or with Mi Re Do? Or should I use Takadimi or Tiri Tiri or Do and Dude? And the big secret with all of that is it doesn't really matter, especially for our purposes here. Just find a system that you like and go with it. The second thing to keep in mind is that you can come back and edit this. If you find that your students are moving through these concepts at a different rate than you expect, then the document can reflect that. This outline is written down. It is not set in stone. So even if this is something that we come back to and change later, having a flexible plan is so much better than not having a plan, a direction at all. Now that we have our big ideas written down for the rest of the year, we can look at where we're going to fit all of it in our scope and sequence. This is an example of one of the scope and sequences inside the planning binder for the 2020-2021 school year. And you can see that we have the ideas we'll cover along the top, and those were pulled straight from the curriculum outline. And then we have the months of the year along the left-hand side. The rows here are the weeks of the month. Now, I like breaking things up by weeks because let's say we only see our students once a week. So that's 4 classes a month. And then if our schedule gets interrupted with something like a snow day and then an assembly, you can see how the amount of class time that we have left with our students is really impacted. So for that reason, I like the detail of a weekly layout. Now, that said, I know colleagues who definitely prefer a monthly layout because it looks a little bit more clean and it's not as overwhelming visually. So this is a template that you can purchase again inside the Elementary Music Planning Kit, and you can edit it for your classroom, or you can make your own from scratch by opening up a Google Sheet. Along the top, you'll write the elements of music and the concepts that you want to cover, that you want to look at. And then along the left-hand side, you will plug in the months of the year. If you want to use the weekly layout, then you will leave room for the weeks of the month. So like this year in January, we have 4 weeks, and so I'm going to skip down 4 cells and then move on to February. If you want to use the monthly layout, then you'll just type in the months down the left-hand side and then not skip any of the cells. Then we're going to make some predictions about what we think we will get to for the rest of the year. And again, our goal here is not to push ahead and cover as much content as possible. We want a year with space to breathe, both for us and for our students. So don't forget to leave some empty space for things like spring break or when you want to take a day off or when the schedule gets interrupted. Those are the 2 big steps to beginning the planning process in the middle of the year. Again, it's really simple. We're just going to look at where we are right now, and then we're going to make an educated guess about where we think we can be by the end of the year. A few things to keep in mind as you go through this process. The first thing is that your students are not behind. Next, we're not trying to rush through as many musical concepts as we possibly can. And then last, it's worth it to go slow and really build a solid musical foundation. After this, we're on to the really fun stuff like selecting specific songs and activities that can help us reach our musical goals. I will link some posts down below that outline the next steps in the planning process after this long range stage that we did today. So now we have a clear map of where we're going. When we start planning with the big picture like this, instead of activity to activity, it really helps us get a clear idea on where we're going with our curriculum, and then how the year is put together cohesively. And this is absolutely something that really serves us well, even if we're doing it in the middle of the year. If you're beginning your curriculum plans in the middle of the year, I would love to hear from you about your situation and how the process is going. You can drop a comment below, you can shoot me an email, victoria@victoriabowler.com, or you can find me on Instagram. I am @VictoriaBowler. Thank you so much for watching and happy teaching.